you need to act fast or risk going blind. These were the words that were told to Timothy way back in 2011. So, as a young boy in class 1, he had eye issues. It was so bad that most of the time he had his homework half done. He could not see. And even just sitting next to the blackboard did not help that much. Worse, when he went at home, as a child, you know how children like to watch, yeah? But that was not his experience. If he needed to even see a shadow of what was being casted, that meant that he had to go just next to the television. Welcome to Beautifully Scarred Podcast, where we talk about our scars, and our scars become our stories, our strength. Now, we talk about real scars, real stories, and real healing. So, as I mentioned, Timothy is a 31-year-old Kenyan man who resides in Nairobi County, and he is an artist. So, I got the privilege of meeting him in 2021 via a common platform that was held, which included organ recipients, organ donors, caregivers, medics, and of course journalists. So on my end, I was there on 2 capacities. 1, as an organ recipient myself, and 2, as a journalist. Now, I must confess that I found his experience extremely intriguing, and this is why. Until then, I had never known anything about corneal transplant. Never in my entire life. And just the fact that corneas were gifts from the dead, like for you to get a corneal transplant, it has to be taken from someone who has been declared dead. And that blew my mind. And from then, of course, that's how we are now having this episode 4. And I hope you enjoy this ride with me. So you can imagine someone not just being at the risk of losing his eyesight, not once, but twice. So what really happened? So as early as 2001, like I mentioned, when he was in class 1, that's when he started to notice that, of course, as a child now, he really struggled. And the environment, like his teachers, when he had his homework half done, interpreted it as laziness. On the other hand, the environment, or rather his family, just thought, this is the normal eye problem, which of course it's gonna dissipate with time. You use eye drops and all that. But doing that for years and years and years and nothing is changing, of course it got them worried. Now, thing is, it was until when he was 12 years old, he actually started putting on glasses when he was 12 years old. So, prescription after prescription, you try contacts, nothing is working. He kept on changing glasses, nothing is working. And that's when they paid a doctor, an optician, a visit in this hospital called Lyons Eye Sight First Hospital. And that is when he actually put a name on the condition, or rather what had been ailing him for years. So, what was the name? Keratoconus. Now, for many people who have battled illnesses, you will agree with me that when you knowing, at least giving a name on what is ailing you is usually a huge breakthrough. However, was this the same case with Timothy? Was it? Well, of course it was. But just as soon as, of course, this was good news, but then the fact that this condition could turn him blind made all the, the fresh breath, like at least we know this is gonna happen, kind of dissipate. And this was very scary. Now, if you're a parent and you have a child whom you have just been told that, things are actually bad than you thought, it may put you in a very bad place, yeah? So Timothy has 2 younger siblings, that is 2 sisters, and his folks, or rather his parents, had to start to look for a solution. I mean, they have been told that their child risks going blind unless he undergoes a transplant of his corneas. Now, I mentioned that the disease, or rather, what was ailing him, he was told it is keratoconus. So what exactly is keratoconus? So keratoconus is the condition where, and I won't go into really the medical terms, but I will sort that in a future episode. So this is the condition where the cornea, so the cornea is the clear tissue in front of the eye. So I'll try and demonstrate with my own. So there's usually the pupil, which is this, think black, I guess, or brown, and then this other part. So you see the way for the normal eye, at least I like to assume mine are normal. So it thins and bulges outward. So usually the cornea, like I've shown you, it's dome shaped, like this. You've seen? Yeah. So, but keratoconus changes the shape and makes it into a cone. So it looks like this. And what is its cause? It is still unknown. So, when I asked Timothy how his experience was just growing up and struggling to see for most of his childhood, he actually told me that since he was young, the details of the disease did not really concern him that much. For him, of course, there was the desire to see. There was also the fear of, one day turning blind, because that could have been his reality, if not by grace of the Lord, of course. So, he says that by the time it reaches in 2011, by this time he's 16, things got so bad, and that's why by the time the parents now decided to take him to see this doctor, who now gave them the name of the disease and told them that they needed to act very fast. He was in high school, yes, but then he says that secretly, or rather, there's a way he was trying to find a way out, just in case he turned blind. So, instead of busying himself so much and finding out about the details on the disease, he started to, quote-unquote, school hunt for schools of the blind in Kenya, just in case, Or rather, he even started making preparation to study Braille, in the event he might have needed it. But then, he says that now in December 2011, there was a breakthrough. So the parents organized a few things around, and then his cornea for his right eye was imported from the United States of America. And this is 2011. Guess how much it cost? 200,000 Kenyan shillings, and all out of pocket. Of course, right now there's a way the medical industry has really advanced, but that was the situation then. So that was the charge for the importation, and then they also had to give 50,000 Kenyan shillings for the hospital fees. But so the transplant was not done at Lions, but it was done at PCEA Kikuyu Hospital. And the doctor who worked on his eye back then was gracious enough, imagine, to forgo his fees, because that's how badly he wanted this young man to be just okay. And so he tells me that his first experience going through the corneal transplant, the doctor tells you that it is a 50-50% percent chance. That means you can have the graft, that is the cornea that has been implanted in someone. You can have the graft and it is accepted by the body, or you can have the graft and it is rejected. So it is not always 100% sure that it's gonna work. Now, considering his age, and then he was also very tense and all that, he says that for his first corneal transplantation, he was put under anesthesia, which usually is not the case, but I guess it's because he was young and all these things going on. So he went through it and just the procedure, and he says that there's a way you just wake up after a while, of course, when the anesthesia has just, So, and that was his first experience. So he resumed school, and I was curious to know, was there a way that perhaps this condition affected his childhood? So he told me that one day in school, just boys being boys, they were walking from tea break. He was actually in a school in Eldoret County. Yeah, I hope it's a county. Yes. So accidentally, a boy elbowed him. And so when that happened, and this is just after he had had his first surgery. Okay. So that happened and a stitch shattered. And now everything was in a frenzy. So he had to be rushed to his doctor's office from all the way in Eldoret to Westlands in Nairobi. And then the stitch was removed, his eyes was checked for any damages, and thank God there was none. So later, although he had to shift schools because of safety, and then, just to be somewhere near his doctor, so that, to avoid such incidences. Now, unfortunately, he says that his health a bit later, sometime later, took a beating because of the change of the environment. So, he kept falling sick, and then there was also constant infections. So, when you get a corneal transplant, it's very delicate. It doesn't just mean that once the transplant is done, all your problems are gone. You have to live your life in extreme caution, because especially during the first year, you need to make sure that there are no infections. So that means you protect your eyes against the dust, strong wind, and all that. And if, God forbid, something happens like it did for Timothy, it can be extremely fatal. Okay? So this disease took a huge chunk of his childhood. This meant that as a boy, he couldn't do sports the way others did. Also, no heavy stuff, not just being a child. The things that children just do to be children. It robbed him of his childhood. And this now has gone into his teenagehood, even after receiving this graft. Remember, this is for the right eye. But the left eye is equally deteriorating. So, in as much as things are getting better, but there's also fear that this one can let me down anytime. So you can imagine, there's a place where you're in gratitude, and there's a place where you're equally scared. You feel me? Yeah. So, this continued until he finished his high school examinations, and then he had to go to the university, and then he was called to Mount Kenya University. So of course, things are normalizing and just appreciating one day after another. And then now, 4 years later, in 2015, his left eye gave up. And so, transplant round 2. But we thank God that this time there was a lot of strides that had been made in the medical industry. So this time, remember the first one cost 250,000 Kenyan shillings, and the doctor chose to forgo his fees. Now, out of grace and the kindness of his heart, good people do still exist, you know. So for the second one, it was 350,000 Kenyan shillings as well, but this was now paid by the then National Insurance, that is NHIF, and considering his mom is a civil servant, so everything was catered for by the government. Okay? So I got curious just to ask, how then does someone know that, or what are some of the telltale signs of keratoconus? Deriving from Timothy's experience, some of the signs include and are not limited to: 1. Blurred vision. 2. Heightened sensitivity to light, bright light that is. Then sudden clouding of vision. Prolonged redness of the eyes, with frequent itching, of course, and recurrent change of eye glasses prescription. So for his second transplant, it was done at Lyons, and this time he wasn't put under anesthesia. So of course, the curious me, I just wanted to find out how the experience was. So he said it doesn't take that long. So you lie on this table and then the procedure is done. So you're awake, you're actually aware of your environment. And he says that if the needle is put under your eyelids and things are just going on. Scary, right? But these are actually real experiences that people go through. So then you'd want to find out that what is it about organ donation and in Kenya? You will be surprised that organ donation is not a topic that is embraced so much in Kenya, especially considering our culture as Africans. It is a very sensitive topic. And Timothy actually says that his case was no different. You see, he notes that there's a lot of stigma where organs are concerned. A cornea is sourced from a dead person, or rather someone that has been declared dead, like brain dead. So, like I said, many Africans have beliefs that hinder organ donation. I don't know if you've heard this, and probably if you're living in Kenya, this is something you have heard before. Imagine just piercing your ears like I have, or the way I've done my nose. There have been people who say when we die and then there is resurrection, God is gonna ask us where the meat, or rather the flesh that was in these places, where they went. So you can imagine something as simple as piercing of the ears. So for organ donation, people usually believe, especially for Africans, they believe that it is bad omen for you to chuck out someone's organs. So, like for the case of Timothy, all of the two corneas came from Kenyans of Asian descent. Actually, sadly, which is the reality, that when it comes to corneal transplantation, the willing donors, you know, the way it works that we have an organ bank, at least for the corneal parts, whereby if I want to donate my corneas upon my death, there's a way you can register your name. I know of Lyons First Sight Hospital, or First Eyesight, my lord. Yeah, so Lyons Hospital. So there's a way you can register yourself if you want to become a donor for the corneas. And so when you are declared dead, then there are specialists who come and harvest the corneas. And that's how it saves a lot of people out here. So in Kenya, mostly the people who do this willingly are Kenyans of Asian descent. Now, for the rest of many of us, yeah, just the beliefs that that is a bad omen and all that. So needless to say, it's something that is still happening and it's saving a lot of lives. Timothy says there's a long list of people who have registered just waiting for the corneal grafts. So what usually happens is once a graft is harvested and it has been identified as a match for those who are on the list, one gets a call from the hospital. The procedure is done under local anesthesia and it doesn't take so much time. So how does one live with a graft? So this was Timothy's experience, or rather the experience that he shares with us. He says that first of all, he's very grateful for the gift that he received, and because of that, he's able to see even today. And since it takes the grace, as in it takes grace for anyone to donate their organs, it is for this selflessness that individuals like him, also like I said, have the grace to even stand here and even share our experiences. So anyway, back to the point. So how does one live with a graft? Life changes after the graft heals and fully heals and becomes part of the body. I mentioned that it takes roughly a year for the graft to fully integrate with your body. So during the healing period, one takes several medications for different issues. And then, considering the cornea is a tissue, it's very sensitive. So it means even after it has been fully integrated in the body, one has to be very careful. Let me tell you, I've had a sit down with him, and when you look, I requested so he could remove his glasses and I just see. So there's one eye that appears to be grayish, and then another one, at least according to me, the other one appears to be bluish. Amazing, right? Especially for someone whose parents are Kenyan and of fully African descent. You know, most of us don't have such eye colors, and it's really beautiful. Anyway, so he equally says that considering, the price of the both eyes comes to around 600 Kenyan shillings. So it doesn't really let people that close. For security purposes, of course, I believe. And then he also has to be physically fit. So that is take walks of about 30 minutes every day. He has to hydrate, to take a lot of water, and cut down on sugar. He actually emphasizes that it is very important to always stay hydrated. Actually, fun fact, he said that crying is very important because there's a way it lubricates the eyes. So, one time he went to get his haircut and his barber actually said that his eyes were from a goat. Imagine. But they're beautiful. Anyway, so there are certain things I want to highlight. First of all, he did his KCSE, that is Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, as a person living with disability after having been ratified by the Kenya Society of the Blind. That was how bad it was. His paper actually was special in a way that set him apart. So sitting down and explaining his condition is usually a hurdle. While you might be shocked, the stigma around organ donation is real. So, another fun fact, he said that the first time he actually noticed how girls really look like was after he had his first transplant. And he said it was like an explosion of colors, just to be able to see the world the way we actually see it. And you see, I couldn't help but be intrigued by one thing he said. So he said, sometimes the little things are the biggest things you can ever have. Sometimes the little things are the biggest things you can ever have. You see the way we take for granted so many things, but for someone just seeing the world the way we do, it's a gift. It's a gift that We never really see it that way, but it's very important. From this experience, Timothy says that he has learned to appreciate people around him. So he says that you and I need to appreciate the people we have, especially our parents, because they will not be there forever. Also, that make God your center stage. The battles in this life are not easy, but it is only Him who can walk with us through the storms that we go through in life. You see, for Him, it's not everyone who has the privilege of actually going through such a situation and being able to share your story from this other side. You know, it's easy to condemn. It's easy to give opinions. It's easy to say that I cannot give my organs when you're not on the receiving end. But if you ever find yourself in a space where you need an organ to actually build better, it is my hope that you've learned something today. Spread kindness. Be wary of your tone when you approach people who may come off as different. And be very sensitive with your speech. You know, Proverbs 18:21 says that the tongue is little, yet you can use it to give life or cause death. So, as little as it is, it can even put down a forest on fire. The beautiful eyes are gifts from the dead and not from gods. And so this was what he had to say in conclusion. And I quote, I have learned to appreciate every detail in nature. In my outlook, the cornea is not just a gift from the dead, but life itself, up to date. There are people who are not so broad-minded in terms of embracing what transplantation involves and organ donation. So much is still needed to be done in terms of creation of awareness. Imagine if the donors were never willing. I would be blind and using Braille, he concludes. So his clarion call for Kenyans is to embrace organ donation. So for the nitty-gritties about specifically what really the cornea does, how the keratoconus is treated, how exactly the harvesting is done, if you need me to go into those details, let me know in the comment section. I had a chat with a specialist, but I'll think about it. Anyway, it has been a nice ride being with you in this episode 4. I look forward to seeing you in episode 5. And this time, I am going to share about a story of a guy who has gone through not one, but 2 accidents. And instead of letting his scars define him, your mind will be blown away. And this is why we have this space. Just sharing our scars. And in real rawness, how they have become our stories and exactly our strength. So, what stood out for you today? And until next time, bisous!